But I find that the things that make my relationship successful with my partner and my children, being a good parent, are the same things that help me in my work life and being a good manager and being a good team player and those kinds of things. So as I work on those skills of communication and really commitment and those kinds of things, it helps me in my work life as well. I was born to two parents that really loved and appreciated the outdoors. My mother was really from a farming family, and so she grew up on a farm during the Depression, and that influences you greatly, and it influenced me as well. My father worked for U.S. Steel his whole life, and he was able to incorporate his love of the outdoor into his career, and I've actually always been a little jealous of him. His career was really kind of breaking edge in the 1970s before there was much pollution control, and he really started that department in U.S. Steel. So he always felt like he gave back and really contributed to the environment. And like I said, I've always been jealous of that. But my love from the environment really came from both of them, and it's been a part of my life ever since. And it's so gratifying for me when I talk to my 19-year-old son and he tells me about a wonderful hike that he went on up in college in Boone and those kinds of things. So I'm passing that kind of legacy on to my children as well. I grew up in a small town. The name of it is Chesterton, Indiana. And you've probably never heard of it. Maybe you have. But what's great about it is a small town, but it's 45 minutes outside of Chicago. So I had the benefits of small town values that were part of my life, but I also had the influence of the diversity of thought, culture, arts and entertainment that came from Chicago, because that's where we got all of our media, and I loved going there. So I think what that taught me has really influenced my personality and the way that I also conduct business. I am able in my career to really appreciate each individually, and I enter into every relationship with a certain level of optimism. I have a very positive thought entering into it. And so that helps me because I've been in human resources for 30 years. And when you can relate to people and they trust you and you have a genuine concern for their well-being, it plays through. And it helps you to be able to lead them to the next stage of where they need to go in terms of business. It also surprises people sometimes that when I share with them that as really a youngster I was a little chubby, you might say. And that has influenced my life greatly too. I was picked on, for my size. And so when you go through something like that, it does impact your life. And how it impacted me was really in high school, I started biking a lot. And I started exercising a lot. And really what it was is that I rode my bike every day to the beach, because I grew up very close to Lake Michigan. And I just really loved it. And what I noticed was a positive impact on my body and also on my mind. And so I've never stopped moving since that time. It's always been a big part of my life. And it's something that has helped me through the stressful times at work or at home or anything else. It helps me to solve those world problems in my head as I kind of hit the pavement outside, those kinds of things. So how did I get here? Well, looking back, it's really those four elements. It's my family values, kind of that optimistic or rosetic kind of personality, and always being a nature lover, and also always being on a move. And I don't really know where life is going to lead me, but I do believe with those elements, I'll make the right path.
So what I find fascinating about people is that we're each made up of a unique combination of attributes. Some of us are artistic, some of us are athletic, some of us are very logical thinkers, others are very abstract thinkers. But no two humans are ever the same. At the same time, what I find really frustrating about people is that we have a tendency to abandon our uniqueness in pursuit of this ideal. Now, this ideal is not something that we create on our own. It's something that we're conditioned for throughout our lives. So throughout our lives, we receive both overt and covert messages that help inform what we believe are desirable attributes and not so desirable attributes. And based on that, we create a mental model of what we think our ideal self should be. Now, it's important to recognize that this mental model exists because it shows up in some profound ways in our lives. It has an impact of how we choose to live, the friends we keep, and how we feel about ourselves. So today I'm going to talk to you about two of the ways that this mental model shows up in our lives. The first is that this mental model teaches us to evaluate ourselves by comparing ourselves to others, right? So at work, is my work as good as so-and-so's? In our personal life, am I as good a mother, a wife, a daughter, a son, whatever the case, as so-and-so? We spend a lot of time and mental energy on this type of thinking, and most of the time, it doesn't end well. Most of the time, we walk away from this type of comparison having identified all the ways that we fall short. So, the second way that this model shows up in our lives is that it teaches us to ignore our strengths, right? So think about it. If we're spending all this time and mental energy on how we fall short and feeling bad about that, we don't really have the capacity to appreciate our strengths. Now, I realize that we live in a world where measurements and metrics are everywhere. They're in our healthcare, they're in our finances, they're at work, they're in our schools. We can't escape it. And I'm not suggesting that we abandon measurements and metrics. I think they're valuable. I think that measurements and metrics are important in our development and our personal satisfaction, so they have a place. What I am suggesting, though, is that we have to become conscious about the fact that this mental model exists in conversations about how we measure ourselves. And we have to, when we're thinking about measuring ourselves, we have to become conscious of, are we measuring the right things and are we using the right scales to measure them? So to that effect, I have three things that I think we all need to consider when we're in conversations or in thoughts about how we're measuring ourselves. The first is weaknesses. We have to acknowledge our weaknesses. Everybody has them, and it does not do us any good to ignore them. But notice I said acknowledge, I didn't say dwell. So acknowledge your weaknesses. The second one is our strengths. And we have to own our strengths. And I think that word own is very important there because I think we have a tendency to gloss over our strengths. So we have to own them, meaning that we have to live in a way where we're giving ourselves the opportunities to allow our strengths to shine. And once you have your weaknesses and strengths acknowledged and owned, I think that's when you can start thinking about creating the scales to measure yourself. And I think for that, we need two scales, right? You need a scale for weaknesses and a scale for strengths. On the weakness side, you would kind of look at what are the areas that you feel like you need to improve on, and then you would establish some developmental goals, and that's what you would measure yourself on. On the strength side, what you're going to measure is very different. On the strength side, what you should be really looking at is, are you really leveraging your strengths to be the best person you can be in whatever aspect that you're working on? So when you start measuring yourself in this way, what you realize is that it's almost illogical to compare yourself to someone else because no two people are going to have that same combination of strengths and weaknesses. So no two people are going to be alike in that sense. So the only person that you can truly compare, the only valid comparison that you have is to who you were in the past. So, am I better today than I was a year ago? Is my second speech better than my first speech? That's the only valid comparison you have. So, one of my favorite person in the world, Albert Einstein, had something very profound to say about this. So, I am going to conclude my speech with his quote, so don't think I can top it. Albert Einstein said, "Everyone is a genius, but if you measure a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its entire life believing it's stupid." Thank you.
Mr. Toastmaster, friends and guests, good afternoon. Have you ever had an unforgettable experience? You know, the type of experience where you remember where you were, how you felt, who you were with, and what you were doing. Just let me see your hand if you've ever had an unforgettable experience. One unforgettable experience that we all have had was September 11, 2001. I think everybody remembers where they were, what they were doing, who they were with, and how that experience made them feel. But that was a bad, unforgettable experience. How about a good, unforgettable experience? Like your first kiss. And I mean the real kiss. I'm not talking about that 1960s Hollywood 2-second peck on the lips. I'm talking about the real deal. I mean the French kiss. You know, that one that comes with an open mouth with a tongue included? That type of kiss? Yeah, that's a good experience. I remember my first kiss, and I'm sure you probably remember yours. My first kiss was with Sharon Newell. She was a pretty caramel complected young lady. She was an older woman. She was in the 6th grade and I was in the 5th. And that experience was a wonderful, unforgettable experience. But unforgettable experiences can actually even come from good books, great books even. You see, when you're engrossed in the perfect book, it can transform the way that you think. It can actually blow your mind, bring you new insights, and take you to new horizons. But what is it exactly that separates a good book from a great book? And that's what I want to talk to you today about, the difference between good books and great books. You see, when I was in the 5th grade, I grew up in Jamaica, and I was in the 5th grade, and it was the graduation ball. And we were all excited, and I went to the ball, and I dressed up in my Miami Vice outfit. I had a white jacket, a white pants, and a roseate shirt full of colors, looked like Don Johnson. And when I got in there, I was a little bit shy, and it was a dark room, and the reggae music was playing, and as most shy boys do when they go into the room, they lean against one of the walls. And when Sharon Newell entered the room, she made a beeline straight for me, and she grabbed me by both hands, and she said, "Come and dance with me." And so she dragged me out onto the dance floor, and we began to just dance and jam to the reggae music all night long, and it just seemed like time evaporated. That brings me to my first point. See, the difference between a good book and a great book is that a good book might catch your attention, but a great book is going to grab you. And there's going to be a chemistry between you and that book, and you are going to be spending time with that book, and you're going to be going through ins and outs and ups and downs with the book, and you're going to really just get lost in the book, and time will evaporate when you're in a great book. As the night proceeded, the DJ changed from the dance hall reggae music to the slow jams. Ooh, buddy. And let me tell you, Cheryl wrapped her hands around me. She put one hand around my back, and the other hand she reached up and held onto the back of my head, and we started swaying. And we're swaying, and we're swaying. And I'm noticing that as we're swaying, there's a little bit more pressure on the back of my head, and she's pulling me closer, pulling me closer, pulling me closer, and bam! She lays it on me. And I'm talking about fireworks going off in my mind. My mind was completely blown. All kinds of thoughts and emotions and experiences just flooding through my body. See, that's my second point. See, a great book is going to shift your paradigm. See, after that first kiss, I never saw life the same again. She opened my eyes to a whole new world. And so when you're reading a good book will give you information, but a great book will actually shift your paradigm. And I remember that as the night went on with Cheryl, we continued to dance and have a good time. And when the night was over, I remember not wanting to leave. I wanted it to last as long as it possibly could. And that whole summer, I would sit down on the back step behind my kitchen door, and I would just roast myself in that hot Jamaican sun. I'm talking about I roasted myself 2 shades deeper black because I was just so caught up thinking and reminiscing about the experience that I had in that kiss with Sharon Newell and just wanting the summer to be over so I could get back to Sharon. It's my third point. See, good books will give you ideas that might last a little while, but sometimes you'll end up forgetting them. But a great book is going to burn an indelible impression in your mind. It's going to leave you with a lingering desire for more. And so when I think about the difference between good books and great books, I think about the fact that a great book is going to grab you. A great book is going to shift your paradigm. And a great book is going to leave you with a lingering desire etched into your consciousness, always wanting more. So friends, if you're ever looking for the difference between a good book and a great book, remember those 3 things as I remembered Sharon Newell. Thank you for your time.
And especially Cheryl. Cheryl was doing her icebreaker today, and the main goals for your icebreaker, your objectives, is really to introduce yourself, but also begin speaking in front of our club. And then if you go a little bit deeper, you find that what you're really trying to do is, do you have an opening, a body, and a conclusion? Now Cheryl caught our attention right off when she said, where am I going? Where was I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? So she caught our attention with her opening very clearly. I think the strengths she had in her speech was that she was very, you could tell, she prepared, she was very organized, and she also exuded that confidence. She was clear in her speech, and when you talk about having an opening that I referred to, her body of her speech, she gave examples, she gave stories, and she intertwined her personal life, her family, her work life, her individual life. It kind of got us to know a little bit broader aspect of who Cheryl is and was. And then when she came to her conclusion, what she did was she brought in the beginning again. So she kind of tied it all together. How did I get here? Where am I going? I think that she did a wonderful job of this, and I think what we can tell is that she's going to have so many story topics. If you listen to that speech, there were so many things that I could say, I want to find out more about that. I want to find out more about that. I mean, but she gave us enough so that we got a big picture of this. But we're going to be in for a treat when we start to find out all the other many stories that she has to share with us, and I look forward to doing that when you're ready to do your next speeches. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Fellow Toastmasters, and especially Dani, and welcome guests. Dani today delivered her second speech, and the objective of the second speech is to organize your thoughts. And I thought Dani was very well organized. There were 2 other goals that Dani had in mind as she handed me her book. She wanted to be able to deliver her speech without notes, which she did. She glanced, but she didn't have to hold them or read from them, so excellent job there. And she wanted to step away from the podium. She didn't want to stand behind the podium, which was great. So she took one baby step, and she came to the side. So Dani, next speech, I want to see you all the way out. Become naked in front of us. Because when you stand out in front, you become vulnerable. You are, in a sense, naked because everybody can see. So you've taken the first step, congrats. Next speech, come out the full way. So Dani had a couple of very good points to her speech. She was well organized. She came out with a question. She asked a question, who has compared themselves to others? Well, pretty much we all have, whether we want to admit it or not. She continued the flow with her speech, talking about strengths and weaknesses, and in order to make a change, the first step is to become aware. Where are your strengths? Where are your weaknesses? She also talked about measurement tools, which I found really interesting because you can't measure the same attribute with the same tool. So a couple things Dani did exceptionally well. I think she used her hands. Dani uses her hands when she speaks, which is not a bad thing because our hand gestures can emphasize your points. So just make sure that you're not overdoing it. I didn't think you were, but that can be a strength, is using your hand gestures purposefully. Also use of humor. Dani had a couple of things that made us laugh, which is always appreciated in a good speech. A couple of things to work on for your next speech, in addition to coming out in front of us here. A couple of times there was some rocking back and forth. And I know sometimes when we're nervous, even though you may not express that through your hands, rocking back and forth can be a sign that there's some anxiety there. So plant your feet. That would make you appear more confident. Secondly, the first thing when you speak, and this happens to a lot of folks, is they start their speech, and they're still walking up to their space. You have the height of your audience's attention at those couple of milliseconds before you utter your mouth, the first word. So stand here, take a deep breath, and you have our rapt attention. Great speech for your second time around. I look forward to the next. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Toastmaster of the Day and General Evaluator of the Day, doing double duty today. Today I'm evaluating Damian. Damian came up here giving his third speech. He was out in front of the podium, which is fantastic. He didn't use any notes. Some of the other things that I think he did really well is asked a question when he first got out here that really captured our attention. He did a great job using pauses, which sometimes really helps grab people's attention. Shockingly, that silence would actually encourage that behavior. He used humor with his story, talking about that older woman, you know, when you're in 5th grade and she's in 6th grade. He did a great job painting a picture with his words, with lots of detail, talking about what he wore to the dance, that Miami Vice outfit, all white and leaning up against the wall, talking about how he was nervous, and all the details of the dance, and his older woman girlfriend-to-be, possibly. And I felt like the point of his speech was talking about how comparing a good book to a great book, and how our experiences that are good and great, and how they relate to how they can relate to books that we've read. He used vocal variety to capture and hold our attention. Sometimes he was softer, and then he would build and build and build until his voice became louder. He varied his pitch. These are all items that really contributed well to his speech. Now, what do I think he could have done better? Maybe because the point of his speech seemed to be about a great book. It would have been interesting to know what he considered a great book, because we described what a great experience is. It'd be interesting to know what, I think the audience would be curious as to what he thought would be a great book. The other area that he could have improved is bringing his manual to be evaluated, and then really following along. This is actually a recommendation for all of us. When we follow along in our manual, there's different speeches that help us explore different areas of speaking. For example, there's one that's about your body speaks. So that may improve your speeches by following the recommendations of the book. There's one about researching topics, one focusing on vocal variety. So that would be my recommendation. Other than that, thank you, Damian.
Thank you.
Breakfast in the morning. Candy is the optimum choice for any breakfast. Let's think about this. Some people like to believe that you need to start off with a healthy breakfast. And then they throw out things like oat bran cereal, or a smoothie, or a protein shake. But let me just explain something to you. If you start off with any of those things, your day is already going the wrong direction. You just ate something that probably didn't taste that great. I mean, maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but not compared to what you could have had. Not compared to your candy. And if you start off that day with your candy, now you just have a smile on your face. You're not going to compare yourself to anybody else because you're going to say, this day is already great. Personally, if I were thinking about my candy, I don't know if it'd be like a candy bar or a piece of cake or something like that. For me, it's a Krispy Kreme donut. That is the way to start off a day. In particular, if you get a Krispy Kreme donut, nice and glazed, and add just a little bit of chocolate icing on top, the day is perfect. Mr. Toastmaster.
For those of you who don't know yet, I am a die-hard Tar Heel fan. And so we did beat San Diego State by 1 point on Saturday, so that was mildly good. And we beat Liberty the last time. So of course I'm going to be yelling. However, you probably didn't see me just recently because it's football season. And I'm a realistic Tar Heel fan. We don't do well in football. Usually we're okay. Now March is a different story. Basketball season, I will be going woo as much as possible and having a lot of smack talk with the state grads and the Duke grads and the Wake Forest grads because that's usually just what I do. So you will hear me yelling throughout the season for sports. That's probably going to happen. Any other time I might be yelling, you know, I went to the beach this weekend. I took a break for the first time, stepped away from Excel spreadsheets and phone calls and accounting. So that is another reason to start screaming down the road on that.
Thank you, Table Topics Master. The circus, the big event, the tent, the camels, the bears, and the smell, oh smell, oh smell. I think that's what drew me out at first. But as I got into my top hat and I was the ringmaster leading the circus and the trapeze flying through the air, the big guy with the mustache and the big muscles that held up the bell bars, man, I just couldn't help myself but join underneath the big tent and the circus. So with that being said, my new career and my new resume is updated as ringmaster of the circus, cheering on the animals, the bears, the man with the mustache, the barbells, the camels, and all of that. I love being under the big tent. It puts me in the spotlight, cheering on what I love most. And man, that smell, oh smell, check your shoes on the way out of the door. Thank you very much, Dr.
Shawn, so guests and visitors, we got like a little snapshot of table topics that can be fun and entertaining, yet nerve-wracking all at the same time. So we're going to go ahead and turn the meeting back to our Toastmasters.